Okay. Well, let's begin. Good morning, Facebook folks. Thanks for joining us. And thank you, non Facebook folks, for joining us. Face to face, folks. We have Facebook and face to face. So we're going to look at, finish up to Job chapter 3 today. So a little bit of chapter 2 and then to the end of chapter 3. So we're starting to move. We're going to get through this book. So it'll go quicker than you think once we're at this stage, honestly. It starts to move pretty quick. So let's take a minute to pray, and then we'll get into it. God, I just thank you for the day you've given us today. Thank you, God, for life and health and breath and strength and just another day to enjoy your company here on this earth that you created for us. Thank you, God, that you love us. And thank you that you communicate to us. So, God, we're reading through this, your book of Job, and we really do want to know what it is that you're telling us and why we're reading it, why you wrote it. So, God, reveal who you are a little bit more to us today. I ask in your name, Jesus. Amen. So, again, if you have a question, let's make sure we use that microphone. Archie, do you want to make sure that microphone's on? Or Nancy? We have a couple seats up here for you. Oh, you're going to stay there? Okay. Oh, good. Bill, thank you. Well, that's a step in the right direction. Bill's brought some oxygen, so way to go, Bill. I'm glad for that. You make me happy, but more so, you make your wife happy. So, you are still a good husband. Thanks. Okay, well, let's get into this. We're going to look at the three friends in the last part of chapter 2, and then take Job's complaint or Job's lament, or however you want to phrase that. Some would call it a complaint, some would call it a lament, depending on how you want to characterize Job. So, the three friends. Let's take a look at them. Chapter 2, verses 11 through the end of the chapter. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. So we have these three friends, and they evidently come from different countries or different regions, at least anyway. Countries weren't perhaps defined or well-defined in those days. But I don't know what we have beeping going on. I assure you there's no fire. Oh, it might be Bill's oxygen thing. So at any rate, so we have these guys coming from 3 different regions. We don't know exactly where they are from. There's a bit of a clue with Eliphaz the Temanite. Teman is later on in Scripture a place that is found in Edom. So Edom is east of where Job would be, a little bit south and east of where Job was. Bildad the Shuhite, some have postulated that Shuar, or where he was from, is maybe from around the Euphrates River, from Acadia kind of thing. So that could be, if that's the case, then he's directly east of Job. And Zophar the Naamathite, some have suggested that that is from the north of where Job is. Could be. Nobody can say that for sure. It's just conjecture. But the thing to note is that these three guys are from different regions. They aren't all living in the same town. They aren't just down the block from one another. They aren't part of Job's entourage, part of his compound. They are likely um, wealthy themselves, and likely some sort of, if we are calling Job a sheik, that's probably what they are as well in that area. Because they're wealthy enough to be informed about what's going on in different regions around them. To know, the news from around, you have to have runners. You have to have people coming telling you the news. So you didn't, you know, pick up the newspaper. You didn't pick up your phone. You didn't look on the television. You had no clue what the weather pattern 60 miles away from you was. Um, so they have this information coming to them. So they've got messengers. So they're in a position to have messengers come to them. Also, the three friends contact one another to agree to meet together to go and sympathize and comfort Job. So, excuse me. Once again, how do they contact each other? They don't jump on the phone. They don't, probably don't have any means except by messengers. So their messengers come and say, hey, we heard about Job. This is what's going on. Okay, run over to Shua and tell Bildad I'll meet him, and let's get Eliphaz, and they coordinate this, and they say, okay, I'm going to start out in 6 days. You start out, and let's get there at this time of the month, or this. They don't have a calendar necessarily, and it is kind of, they can't just jump in the car and say, yep, I've got my atlas, and it's about 6 hours. I'll see you then. They're on camels or donkeys or walking or whatever it is, and they don't know what they're going to run into. But they are clearly wealthy enough to have messengers, wealthy enough to be able to make contact with their friends, to be able to organize their caravans, in a sense, to come and meet together. Because if their journey, um, it's as if we would. Let's see, Carissa, who's in Bozeman now, and she said, "Hey, Dad, can you and Mom come for a visit?" Okay, but we don't have a car. All we have is a horse and a buggy. Okay, well, we're going to leave in 3 days, and we'll hope to be there in about 10 days. And depending on what weather, or if there's robbers, or if the horse gets lame, or whatever, that kind of stuff, or the wheel falls off the wagon, or whatever it is. So that's for them to be able to organize that and bring their caravan along, and they had an entourage. They're wealthy enough to do that, because generally only the wealthy would be able to travel, for that matter, in those days. So when you think about it, you think about the great trouble and expense it was even for Mary and Joseph to travel to Bethlehem from Nazareth. I mean, that was a long journey. So there really wasn't a whole lot of seeing the rest of the world. Travel wasn't a thing. You didn't have travel agents, I don't think, in those days. Hey, let's go see Rome. Let's go see Greece. Hey, I want to see London. It's kind of, I've got my area of 10 block radius, and I know the people around there, and that's my life for 90 years, and that's my family's life for generations, and that's what we know. Unless you're wealthy enough to be able to travel. And I suppose that is, in a sense, still today, right? You still got to be wealthy to travel. I mean, ultimately, none of us here would say, well, we're not wealthy, but we're wealthy, right? I mean, nobody from poor third world countries are considering looking at costs of plane flights or cruises or anything like that. So, at any rate, their purpose is to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. I think they really did care about Job. They were friends. They heard about it. They wanted to help him as much as they could. You have family or good friends from a different part of the country, and something happens catastrophic, and you want to be there for them. And so you arrange to go there because you really do care about them, right? So they really did care about him. They wanted to be there. They wanted to help him. They wanted to do whatever they could. So that's Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Let's look at their initial response because their initial response is fabulous, right? They get there, and it says in verse 12, when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. Think about that. If they didn't know Job from before, they wouldn't have known him now. They could barely recognize him. Is this the same guy we knew? Didn't we have a big celebration at his tent last year? Like Job was a healthy, lots of color to his face, vibrant kind of guy. And they look at Job, and if you remember from last week's lesson, his face and body had changed so significantly because of his illness and his disease, and his sickness, is that they couldn't recognize him. Here's a guy that's probably emaciated, peeling skin, sores, um, parts of him turning black, might have some sort of leprosy going on. He can't sleep. He's haggard. His eyes are sunk. He hasn't been eating, so he's thin as a rail. I mean, who is this guy? So imagine how appalled you would be. Here's Job. I don't know what the time frame is from them hearing about Job and then going to see Job. Probably a month or two anyway, I would think. By the time you get messengers to and from and all that kind of thing. So it didn't take very long at all for Job to be a different guy. So they recognize that, man. What's your response when you see people that you've known for years and they have this, often it's cancer, right? And you see them, you just don't recognize them, do you? And you're like, oh my goodness, is this the same vibrant person I knew 2 years ago? Yeah. So that's the emotions they're going through. Is they're seeing this guy, and they're seeing Job and going, is that really you, Job? I can't believe that's Job. And they then display, they display the conventional gestures of grief for that time. So for that time, it was weeping. Now, they probably really did weep. It's not just we got to make ourselves cry because that's what we do. I mean, we weep when we see that kind of thing. But the conventional gestures of grieving were throwing dust in the air onto your head. You just throw that dust in the air. That was kind of the dust to dust, ashes to ashes kind of thing. But it was also, I want to use the word self-deprecating, but not necessarily. It was to say that we can't celebrate life. We can't laugh about life. We can't be happy about life when our dear friend is like this. And that dust being thrown in the air and onto your head was that sign of, I'm getting as low as I can, as humble as I can, as close as I can to the humility of what's happening to my loved one, sort of thing. They tore their garments. So that was another thing. To tear your garment was a gesture of grief. And then they sat down with him. So they sat there on the ash heap or the rubble heap or wherever he was, but they sat there. They identified with him. They didn't bring their lawn chairs. They didn't say to their servants, hey, bring me my cushy throne, please. And the footstool. Don't forget the footstool. And bring my umbrella and bring me a drink. No, they sat on the ground with Job. Dust on their heads, their uh, garments are torn, and they sit with him. And they sit with him for 7 days and 7 nights. um, Significance of that really is in those days, that was a statutory period for mourning for the dead. Okay, so to sit with someone for 7 days and 7 nights, it was, in those days anyway, that was how long you were supposed to take, a minimum, to mourn for the dead. 7 days and 7 nights. Every culture has something. You know, you hear the wakes of, in Ireland they had the wakes, and and every the Puritans and Mennonites and whatnot, they all had their standard. You wear black for this many days, you mourn for this many days, and you don't stop mourning until the 30 days is up or whatever. So they see him and they sit for 7 days and 7 nights, as if maybe to say, is Job as good as dead? Is this guy going to recover? Um, this, by the way, was the origin of the Jewish mourning ritual of sitting Shiva with somebody. You've probably heard that. Shiva really just means, Shiva is Hebrew for, that's the word 7. It's the number 7. So sitting Shiva, sitting 7 days. Let me take you to Genesis chapter 50. Genesis 50 and verse 10. This is Joseph. Joseph's dad has passed away. Genesis chapter 50 and verse 10. Man, Gary, your Bible is, the words are so large I can almost read it from here. I know it. That's great. Genesis 50 and verse 10 says, when they reached the threshing floor of Arad, or is that a T? Atad, I need my glasses. Near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly, and there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. Okay, so that's kind of what he's sitting Shiva. He's sitting for 7 days. He's observing that mourning period. So that's what his friends are doing. They see him there. They identify with his lowliness, his sickness. They tear their garments, throw dust, and they sit for 7 days and 7 nights. It's hard to say if they did that because they thought Job was as good as dead, or was it just a way of saying that this is as serious as death to them. Maybe turn to Ezekiel. Ezekiel 3, and that'll give you just a different perspective so that we can't answer the question definitively. So Ezekiel chapter 3, verses 14 and 15. So Ezekiel is called to be a prophet in chapter 2. In chapter 3, the Spirit lifts him up and takes him away and sets him down. Ezekiel 3, verses 14 and 15. Ezekiel writes, the Spirit then lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness and in anger of my spirit, with the strong hand of the Lord on me. Verse 15 of chapter 3, I came to the exiles who lived at Tel Aviv near the Kibar River, and there, where they were living, I sat among them for 7 days, deeply distressed. So he's not sitting because he's mourning their death, but he's sitting because he's mourning that, look at what's happened to my people. Look at how low they've been brought. They used to be a great people. We used to be God's chosen people, and now they're sitting in chains and exile with no rights, no happiness. They don't know what's going to happen to them. And so I think that's probably what the friends are doing for Job. Job used to be a great man, and look at him now. He's nothing. He's as low as a person can ever get, besides death, and that might happen too. So they recognize his great suffering. They don't speak a word to him. It says, no one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. Um, they were simply horrified and speechless at the sight of Job. They just couldn't believe what they were seeing. And there's no words for it. What do you say? What is there to say? What do you do? Well, you sit there. Um, they knew there were no words that could bring any real comfort to Job. You know, that's there are times in our life that you know, there's just no there are times where there's just nothing can be said to bring any real comfort to our life. Maybe you just find out about a diagnosis, or you just find out that your good friend from high school just passed away, and it's in those moments there's no word that brings real comfort. You're in shock, you're in dismay, you don't know how to respond, you struggle to respond, your emotions are all over the place. Dismay, anger, disbelief, bargain with God. I'm not going to accept it. It can't be happening. This isn't real. Maybe I heard it wrong. There's got to be something going on here. I got to figure this out. There's a way out. There's something can be done. Let me call in favors. We'll change this. It's at that time of grief that there are real no words that bring comfort. No platitudes, no quips, not even any Bible verses, right? I mean, very often we as I think as North Americans, as Americans, we're so uncomfortable with silence that we will say anything to break the silence. And often it's stupid. But we've broken the silence, so okay. Right? I mean, you see that lots of places. People just don't know what to do with silence. That's why TVs are on all day, or the radio's on all day. How many people are able to drive from here to there without a radio on, or your phone playing, or music in the car? Very few. Very few. You go into people's houses and often the TV's on, or there's background music somewhere, right? Not that that's bad, but it's our dislike and discomfort for silence. We just don't like silence. I'm not sure why. Why are we afraid of silence? Why do we dislike it? Okay, it causes us to think about. Yeah, let's use that microphone. Gary said it causes us to think about the person, or what's happened, the news we just heard about that person, or the object of what. Yeah, yeah, it does. It causes us to think. It causes us to evaluate. It causes us to have to come to terms with it, maybe.
Sometimes it's hard to be silent because you want to lift up, you want to encourage, you want to reach out. You know, it's just really struck me in this discussion this morning over this passage has really changed my heart in regards to my attitude about his friends.
Mm,
It's no insignificant thing to the gesture that they've shown him.
yeah,
I mean, just sitting for a few hours with somebody in hospice
yeah,
or in the hospital.
hmm,
It's hard to sit there and be quiet.
yeah,
You want a need, you feel a need to do something, to say something, to change something,
right,
somehow to lift.
yeah,
But the largeness of Job's condition at this point, it's taken their words away and
yeah,
just silence.
yeah, yeah,
I've always had the attitude about Job's friends. In some fashion, they've come to point a finger or wag a finger
Mm,
at him
mm,
for where he's at.
right.
But this frames it in my mind a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they did come to sympathize and comfort him. And I think we're going to see that although the opposite happens, they really do believe that they can help Job and bring about blessing in his life again. But they just start getting angry at him, and there's some what's it called, sarcasm that takes place, and sarcasm is, I think sarcasm is one of the poorest ways to communicate. I had to come to a point in my life where I cut out sarcasm from my life, because sarcasm is just, uh, it hurts people, right? Now there's some good sarcasm, but I didn't know the difference. I was a sarcastic person, and man, I could I could like that, and
It always has an element of truth for the zing.
right, the zing. Yeah, that's the word I needed. Yeah. Yeah, so I just cut out sarcasm altogether because I don't think it lifts up. Um, and so I think that, you know, those that's a good point, because we do want to lift people up. We do want to help people. We do want to encourage people. Um, Yet at the same time, we don't like silence, and it might not be the right time. You know, when I do marriage counseling or premarital counseling, particularly, you know, when you're talking together, um, it has to be said lovingly, but it also has to be said in the right timing, right? Um, you can't just, yeah, you're right, and there's truth in that, but this is not the right time to tell me that. It's the right time to love me, but not the right time to tell me that. So, because, you know, we get this, well, the truth hurts, doesn't it? Really? No. God never intended the truth to harm somebody. We take the truth and harm somebody. This truth has to be lovingly motivated and sensitively timed. And I think that's what these guys are doing right now. They know the timing's not yet. There's a time to talk about God. There's a time to talk about Scripture. There's a time to quote Romans 8:28. For all things work together for those who love God. There's a time for that. But there's not a time for that. And I think sometimes we're so quick to want to break the silence, and we're so quick to, oh, I got a word of scripture for you that I know will lift you up. Hey, I just want you to know that even though, you know, even though you just got the call that you have cancer and you have 2 weeks to live, God works all things for good for those who love him. It's not the right time, you know? Or, hey, cast your cares on him for he cares for you. Well, I don't feel like that right now. I feel like I've been blindsided by God. I feel like God really doesn't care about me, and he's forgotten about me, and this is why I have this diagnosis. So don't quote a Bible verse to me right now. God and I are not on good terms right now, so, you know, shut up, kind of thing. Um, and, and we want to be helpful, but it ends up being harmful. Because what we try to do is fix the situation or force God into the situation in a way that God shouldn't be forced. God's there, but we try to force him into the light. And I think what we really need to know is that your presence, our presence, is the presence of Christ. And that's enough. And so sit in silence. It's okay. You don't have to You don't have to be the great conversationalist. You don't have to make small talk. You don't have to, hey, how about those Seahawks? You know, you don't have to do that. You can sit in silence and just be there. You can pray. But don't pray Romans 8:28. I mean, unless God says now's the time. But I knew of a friend, well, more of an acquaintance. At any rate, he was in his 40s, and his wife passed away. And someone well-meaning in the church came and said to him, in trying to encourage him, "Hey, just think, God has someone better for you in mind." Because he was trying to say all things work out for those who love him, and God's got a better plan for you. Like, his wife just passed away. "Hey, Wayne, God's got someone better for you." What? It's not very comforting. Needless to say, those two were not friends after that for a while. Right? I mean, he meant to help, but there's this thing there's this thing called well-intentioned dragons, right? You can be a well-intentioned dragon sometimes. Hey, let me, dragons with their fire breath. Hey, let me warm that up for you. Oops, I just burnt that guy to a crisp. I had good intentions to help him, but I just burnt him. Sometimes we as disciples of Christ become well-intentioned dragons. And yeah, that's true. Right. It sometimes is, um, yeah, the person who's saying that wants to feel good about themselves because, hey, I've helped them. I've brought God to the situation. I'm lifting them up. And it's more of a self exaltation thing than it is really looking to help the other person. Yeah, yeah. And I like that about the three friends. They don't exalt themselves at all. In fact, they humble themselves and they identify, they sit on the ground with him, and they recognize his grief. And they don't try to do something to bring him out of his grief. They aren't making balloon animals. They aren't, you know, um, singing songs, and they just recognize his grief and his pain, his loss, his confusion. So I think the friends really were there to help. They really did want to not fix the situation, but support Job and let him know that we love you. And there weren't any words that could convey that more than just their presence and being there. And you know that too, right? I mean, somebody comes from a long distance because we've lost a friend or relative and they come from a long distance. That's huge. It's like you don't have to say anything more. You came. Thank you for being here. That said all I need to know, sort of thing. Any comments on that before we slide into Job's lament? Okay. Let's. I'm just going to take time to read all of chapter 3. It's a wonderful lament or complaint. It probably has a bit of both in there. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Here's how he did it. He said, "May the day of my birth perish, and the night that said, a boy is conceived. That day, may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine on it. May gloom and utter darkness claim it once more. May a cloud settle over it. May blackness overwhelm it. That night, may thick darkness seize it. May it not be included among the days of the year, nor be entered in any of the months. May that night be barren. May no shout of joy be heard in it. May those who curse days curse that day, those who are ready to rouse Leviathan. May its morning stars become dark. May it wait for daylight in vain and not see the first rays of dawn. For it did not shut the doors of the womb on me to hide trouble from my eyes." Verse 11, Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? Why were there knees to receive me and breasts that I might be nursed? For now I would be lying down in peace. I would be asleep and at rest with kings and rulers of the earth who built for themselves places now lying in ruins, with princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or Or why was I not hidden away in the ground like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light of day? There the wicked cease from turmoil, and there the weary are at rest. Captives also enjoy their ease. They no longer hear the slave drivers shout. The small and the great are there, and the slaves are freed from their owners. Verse 20. Why is light given to those in misery and life to the bitter of soul, to those who long for death that does not come, who search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave? Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? Sighing has become my daily food. My groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. So here's Job pouring out his heart. After 7 days, his friends have said nothing, and Job is the first one to speak. And Job pours out his heart. He knows that these guys have come for him. They're his friends. So he breaks the silence, and he's gonna express his great anguish and suffering. This chapter can be divided into 3 sections, really. There's a conception lament, verses 3 through 10. Why was I even conceived? I wish that day of my conception wasn't there. There's a birth lament, verses 11 through 19. Why was I born? And then there's a life lament, verses 20 through 26. Why am I still here? Why was I conceived? Why was I born? Why do I still have life? In the first section of his conception lament, he's really saying, why? I wish the day of my conception didn't happen. I wish that day wasn't even on the calendar. I wish that day had never entered into any month, in verse 6. I wish the darkness was hidden away in deeper darkness, and I wish the day had turned to darkness and there was no light to shine upon it. I wish that day never happened, that I was conceived. Why is it even there? I wish that night, that time would have been barren, and no shout of joy would have been heard in it. There wouldn't have been any happiness. There wouldn't have been any conception. And verse 8 is interesting because in verse 8, Job uses the language of mythology of the ancient Near East. He says, may those who curse days curse that day, those who are ready to rouse Leviathan. So Leviathan, again, was the mythical dragon of chaos. So it's not that Job necessarily believes in Leviathan, but he's using mythical language to express his deep pain and sorrow. And many commentators, by the way, and I think your Bible will have it in verse 8, many of those who curse days, you'll see a little number there or letter. If you look in your footnotes, it'll probably say C. Many commentators believe that it's probably C is the right word because it coincides with Leviathan. So it would read, may those who curse the sea curse that day, those who are ready to rouse Leviathan. Leviathan was the chaos dragon of the sea, the primordial seas. We talked about this a little bit before. Leviathan was that great sea monster that brings the earth back into chaos, into the primordial sea of creation. So the ancient Near East mythological creation story is that there are good gods and there's bad gods, there's evil gods. And Leviathan was the chief of the evil gods. He was the great sea dragon. And there's these primordial seas, and they're just swirling around, and the dragon is, in charge of that, and there's chaos, and then the good gods get together and they overpower Leviathan and his crew. And so out of that primordial sea comes earth, comes land, comes plants, comes people. And so, as long as the good gods are stronger than Leviathan and the evil gods, then creation's safe, then people are safe. But once um, the the good gods begin losing strength or losing worshipers, then Leviathan gains the upper hand, and the earth is being dragged back into chaos. The earth is going to fall apart. Volcanoes, storms, natural disasters, sun going in front of the moon. That was all caused by Leviathan and his gang of evil gods. He's the sea monster of chaos, and really becomes a type for Satan later on, as we see that in um, um, systematic theology. Let me take you to. Oh, the third lament is the life lament. Why am I still here? Why do I still have life? Verses 20 through 26. Conception lament 3 through 10, birth lament 11 through 19, and life lament 20 through 26. Let me take you to Job 41. Job 41, verses 1 and 2. This, of course, is God speaking, but God kind of uses in this, the author puts this mythological language into God's mouth as well. In Job 41, 1 and 2. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose or pierce its jaws with a hook? Right? So that language of the great sea monster of chaos, the primordial sea monster. And God says to Job, can you go fishing for Leviathan? I can. Can you put a hook in its mouth? I can. Can you tie it up? I can. Job, you can't. So who are you, Job? Right. So we see Leviathan, and I'm not sure if I think we see that another time. I think we do, at least once more. So Job is really saying, I wish that I wish that Leviathan would have been roused so that creation would have been in chaos, and that day of my birth, my day of my conception, never would have been a day, because the earth would have been dragged into chaos once again by Leviathan. Oh, that Leviathan would have had power over the gods, and then I would never have been conceived. So that's really what he's saying there. Okay, so he's noticed that, Job doesn't accuse God or even doubt God. Job, nowhere in this lament does he charge wrongdoing against God. He doesn't bring any charge against God. We're going to see that he gets to the point where he does. But right now he doesn't. He still believes in God, still trusts God. The same Job who said, the same Job who did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing, doesn't charge God with wrongdoing, doesn't accuse him. And he doesn't necessarily believe in the mythical creation story. He just wished it would have been true at his time of birth. I wish that would have happened, because then I wouldn't be here. And he recognizes God's sovereignty. Look at 3:23, right? Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? So he recognizes God's sovereignty over this. So clearly Job knows that God's in control and not Leviathan. But he's just saying, it would have been nice never to have been conceived or born. Note also that Job, throughout this whole lament or complaint, I think there's a little bit of both, but he never contemplates suicide. So never once does he say, man, I'm going to kill myself, or I wish I could, or would somebody give me a knife, or whatever. He never contemplates suicide. He never says that he wishes he could. He just says that I wish I was never born so I don't have to experience what I'm experiencing now. He doesn't say I'm going to take myself out of it because he knows only God can do that. And he knows that God's put him there. So he's experienced extreme pain and suffering and even confusion about God. And so he says, man, I wish the day of my conception didn't happen. And since it did, then I wish I would have been stillborn. I wish I would have died in the womb. I wish I would have died just shortly coming out of the womb. I mean, I would have been better off because I wouldn't have had to experience this. That's just his deep pain. Why didn't I perish at birth? Any thoughts about that before I kind of move on a little bit? It's a hard topic to talk about. But I'm glad you're not afraid of the silence. Interesting that Job recognizes that death is the great equalizer, doesn't he? Whether you're kings, rulers, great palaces, princes who have gold and silver, or whether you're one of the wicked, whether you're a captive, whether you're a slave, whether you're small or great, death, it all ends in the grave. Yeah. This was written during the days of probably David and Solomon, probably during that time when all of that literature was written. So that would have been that would have been, no, it would have been about 1000 BC. Yeah, yeah. Well, and the setting for this, though, it was written about 1000 BC, but the setting that it's written in is probably around 1500, 1800, 2000 BC. So no, by that point, in the very beginning of Genesis, now if I can find it really quickly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, right. Um, I think it's in no, chapter 6, maybe. Oh, yeah, 6:3 of Genesis. The Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years." So shortly after and just before the flood, God says, "You're not going to live to 969 years anymore. Methuselah, you got the record. You'll always have it." Yeah, yeah. And Noah was what, 800 and something? I think he was. So yeah. Yeah, yeah. So it was a normal lifespan, what we would call normal lifespan. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. When my back first hijacked me, you know, I wanted Jesus to return. I'd never been so anxious for Christ to return that day. I mean, the first 3 months, it was excruciating. And I thought, I didn't, it was a different perspective in the sense that I didn't say, man, I wish I wasn't ever born, but I said, Jesus, would you come today, please? Because if I can't deal with this another day until next day. Jesus, I can't deal with this another day until the next day, kind of thing. But yeah, we get to that point. It's like, oh my goodness, why? This hurts way too bad.
That second portion, the second lament, has a lot of vibes similar to Ecclesiastes.
Yes,
Solomon's thoughts.
that is a very good point. Yes, the writer of Ecclesiastes, Solomon, there are similarities about the grave being the great equalizer, right? We all end up as dust. Whether you're great or little, we all end up in the same place. Can't take anything with you, kind of thing. No matter how much you have or little you have, you're going to end up with the same thing. So, which was which was interesting literature at the time because you had at that time Egypt and the pharaohs, and of course they believed you could take everything with you, and that's why you packed it all in, and you had these great big burial tombs because he's going to need all this wealth in the next life, right? So, and this literature comes along and says, yeah, not going to happen that way. So, so Job is just longing for the grave. I wish I hadn't been conceived. I wish the world had been thrown into chaos. I wish Leviathan would be true and that mythology would have taken control during the days of my parents, but it didn't. I wish I would have been stillborn because they're better off than me. And that's Ecclesiastes as well. The stillborn are better off. They never see the evil of this world, kind of thing. And that's what I wish I'd perished at birth. And why didn't I die as I came out of the womb? And now in his life lament is, why am I even here? What am I doing? I hurt so much. I'm not even the same person I used to be. The grave is a good place for me. It'll all be done. So that I'm looking forward to that kind of thing. Verse 20, why is light given to those in misery and life to the bitter in soul? Why does God sustain me? Why do I still have life? Why? Well, he really says death would be a blessing from God, right? Those who search for it more than for hidden treasure. That Proverbs uses that language, but in searching for wisdom, it says, "My son, search for wisdom as one would search for hidden treasure." Wisdom is greater than gold, more precious than fine silver. So give over your life to search for the hidden treasure of wisdom. Well, here, which is wisdom literature as well, Job is saying, man, why do I still have life when I'm searching for the death more than, as for hidden treasure? It would be a wonderful thing. Why am I not in the grave? Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? Verse 23, that's an interesting verse. Look at, hedged in. Let me read it again. Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? Go back to Job 1:10. I'm going to read from verse 9, Job 1:9 and 10. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? That was a good hedge, wasn't it? God put a hedge around Job so that Satan couldn't do everything that Satan wanted to. Now Job says, why has God hedged me in? The same hedge that protected him, he now sees as a hedge that is destroying him, that is hurting him. He's got a different perspective about God's hedge in his life, right? The hedge was a good thing. We can get that perspective, right? God's laws, if you will, God's ways, God's will, God's word. It's a hedge to protect us. It's a hedge to keep us from sinning, keep us from walking away from God, keep us from ending up in everlasting death. Yet we can look at that hedge and see it not as protection, but as something wicked that God puts there to keep us from really having fun, from really living life, right? Man, that's just not fair, God. Why can't I do that? So there's a bit of irony going on here by the author. Early on, we read the hedge is something that God protects that person by, and it's still protecting Job. Remember, Job is still hedged in a good way because God said to Satan, but you cannot touch his life. You can't kill him. You can skin for skin, you can do that, but you cannot kill him. There's still that hedge about him. And Job is like, why is this hedge even here? God, why are you hedging me in? For sighing has become my daily food. Sighing and groaning really aren't words that really express the deepness of what's going on enough. You know, we think of sighing as, oh, I've had a hard day, and I sit down in my chair and I go, ah. But his sighing is that deep stress, pain, loss, grief, confusion, that sigh of, I have no idea how to express this except to groan, and this noise comes out of me because of my great distress. It's that noise of, it's the noise of when you sit with a loved one and you know they are breaths away and they take their last breath, and there's that groan. There's that something from within that just comes out, right? That's what it is. It's that, right? You know that. You remember it. That's what Job's going through. And he says in verse 25 and 6, what I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. He's feared that maybe God would be against him. He feared that bad things could happen to good people. He feared that he would lose God's favor somehow. Remember in Job 1, 4 and 5, Job would make sacrifices for his children because maybe they sinned. And so I want to make sure they have the favor of God, and so I'm going to sacrifice for them. Job was very diligent, very disciplined in making sure he was right with God. And we discover here that he had this fear of losing God's favor. What happens if I lose God's favor? What happens if bad things happen to me? What I feared is upon me. What I dreaded in life was upon me. I was running from it, hoping it would never happen to me, hoping I could live out my days without anything bad happening to me. I could run into the grave and say, man, I lived a great life. Nothing bad ever happened to me. Nothing, God always blessed me. But he couldn't outrun it. He couldn't outrun the effects of sin on the world. And he dreaded it. And now there he is. That's what Job expresses to his friends. Turn to Jeremiah chapter 20. Just to get another perspective, maybe. Well, yeah, not a perspective necessarily, but Jeremiah 20, verses 14 through 18. Because Job wasn't the only one who wished he had never been born. Job wasn't the only one who was confused in his relationship with God. Job wasn't the only one who went through trouble and misunderstanding with God. Verse 14 of chapter 20 of Jeremiah, he writes, "Cursed be the day I was born. May the day my mother bore me not be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought my father the news, who made him very glad, saying, a child is born to you, a son. May that man be like the towns the Lord overthrew without pity. May he hear wailing in the morning, a battle cry at noon. For he did not kill me in the womb. With my mother as my grave, her womb enlarged forever. Why did I ever come out of the womb to see trouble and sorrow, and to end my days in shame?" So Jeremiah was feeling that angst. Ezekiel sat for 7 days with the angst of what's happened to my people. So the writer of Job is really identifying really the human condition, which we all have gone through maybe a few times. So that's Job pouring out his heart to his friends who really did want to comfort him and be there for him. And he's the first to speak, which I think is important because the friends weren't the first to speak to say, hey, let me tell you something about life, Job. Job was the first one. Guys, this is what I feel like. This is what has happened to me. This is my deep anguish. What are you going to do with it? Thoughts, comments? Hopefully I don't leave you depressed. Jerry.
Maybe it's because I had Job on a pedestal
Okay.
because of his faith and the way he first accepted all the calamities.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's stepping over the line.
How do you mean stepping over the line? So because you're not using the microphone, let me just say to those on Facebook. So Jerry's asked, or feels like Job has stepped over a line and he's not as faithful as we saw him back in the first 2 chapters.
In verse 10, Job did not. Up till now, he hasn't sinned
Right.
in anything that he's said.
Right.
But now he's cursing the day. This is the day that the Lord had made. The Lord made all the days. He's cursing the day. He's eliminating light from the day.
Well-
He's being unthankful, and unthankfulness is a sin. I'm a little worried about where he's going here. He's not being ungodly, but he's being unthankful.
We would like to see a Job that is listening to some worship songs and praising God and saying Romans 8:28, right? But he's I mean this is
Morning, I understand. I think he's stepping beyond the line
yeah.
in some of the things he said.
Yeah. I think he's still trusting in God. He still knows that God is sovereign. He hasn't cursed God. Yeah, he said, cursed be the day, but I don't think he's making the connection that this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I mean, he's just saying, man, I feel so terrible. I wish this day had never been and I'd never been conceived. I'd never been born and I wouldn't have to live through this. And I think that's fair. I don't think it's unexpected. And he's probably close to a line. I might agree. I think you had a comment first.
Verse 24, for my sighings come to me instead of food, my groans pour out like water. I see an illustration in that as I age, there's times during the night that I head to the restroom with urgency.
Yeah.
And I think the pain inside of him has built up so much, he can't control the groans that come out.
Yes.
And he's being really honest and expressing what's inside.
Yes.
And
yes. I think we find that language in the laments of the Psalms as well. Yes. Possessions, family, health. Yeah. Yeah. I think, he's lamenting. David laments in the Psalms. There are other Psalms of lament, and Psalms of even, what do you do with the imprecatory Psalms? God, that you would destroy them, that you would be against them, that you would, is that sinning? Shouldn't we be praying for their salvation, but you want them destroyed? David, you're not a very righteous guy. Well, we're human beings. Um, yeah, right. Right. Yes. If you weren't so cute, you would never have made it to be 5 years old. Never mind two. Yeah, yeah, that's very true. I think there's an honesty that's going on, and I think that should be encouraged in our lives. There's an honest, I don't understand God. I don't know where He is. This isn't the way He works. I don't like it. God, I'm not happy with you. I wish I wasn't in this position. God, it's not that I hate you. It's not that I don't believe you. It's not that I don't trust you. But God, I'm confused. I don't understand. I hurt. I'm in pain. I'm in deep sorrow. All I can do is make these groans that come from deep within. And you know when you can hardly breathe sometimes because of the bad news you've just received, or something has happened and you can hardly breathe and your breath is coming in great gasps. And it's just like, I don't even know if I want to take another breath because my life feels like it's just over. And that's where he's at. Yeah.
Thinking about Jerry's comment
Mhm.
about all of a sudden Job appears less spiritual
Mhm.
because he's expressing these things instead of sucking it up, buttercup, you
Right.
know,
Right.
and that's really liberating from in a perspective that we can be totally honest with God,
Mhm.
with what's going on in here, and not
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
reflect something that
Yeah.
isn't real.
Yeah. Yeah. My my experience, my salvation experience was through the Psalms. Uh, because I went to church. Oh, this is being recorded too. Got to be careful what I say. Um, I went to church as growing up as a kid, and just saw a lot of ungodly stuff happen in the name of godly people. And so I didn't want anything to do with church. I didn't want anything to do with Christians. I thought, you know what, they're no different than anybody else. They're fighting, they're swearing, they're backstabbing, they're insincere. Phew. And so, I walked away from God and said, yeah, not worth my time. Like, I'm going to be honest and, just be who I am, and I'm going to, do whatever. And I started reading the Bible again and reading the Psalms. When I graduated, somebody gave me a book on the Psalms. I don't know why you'd give me a book on the Psalms. I'm, 18, and they give me a book on the Psalms. It's like, who's going to read that? But I did. Actually, it took me a year after I saw the book, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to start reading this. So I read it, and I thought, I'm going to start reading the Psalms. And I meet this guy who can say, God, I don't understand you. Well, every person that I knew of that was a Christian said, oh, yeah, God works this way and does this, and you can understand God. Hmm. God, I'm mad at you. Wait, every person that I know that was a Christian said, oh, no, you can't say that to God. You can't be that way to God. You have to be, just this one way, happy, joyful, peaceable. You can't. God, I'm shaking my fist at you, and I don't know that I want anything to do with you because, God, you're not treating me right. You can say that? You can have emotions and feelings and honesty before God. You don't have to be the perfect in the box, this is what a Christian looks like. Wow. And God didn't strike him down. God answered him, and God was gracious to him, and God called him and used him and loved him and forgave him. And I thought, that is the God I want to know. And so I gave my heart to Christ through the Psalms because I said, I want to know that God, not the one I've been taught and heard about and saw in different ways. I want to know the God who says, you can be honest with me. Whatever is going on in your life, if you hate me, if you dislike me, if you're confused, if you love me, whatever it is, I will always be here. I will always love you. I will always forgive you. So let's walk together. You be real. I'll be real. And let's journey together. That's the God I want to know. And I just, just balk at churches who have God in a box, and this is what God does and what he looks like and how we control him, and this is what you look like so you can control God. And I just want to scream and say, stop being so insincere and getting things wrong. Like, God is way bigger, way scarier, way more unknown than we can ever know. And so I think this is what's going on with Job. And this is what we're going to see with Job. Who is this God? Because he's not the God I thought I knew. Lana.
There's a wonderful Matthew West song that says, I'm fine. Yes, I'm fine, but I'm not. So it gets back to the honesty and permission to say,
Yeah.
I'm not okay.
Yes.
Or things are not fine in my life right now.
See, that's church.
That is true.
If we come here and we're expected to act a certain way and answer certain ways, how you doing? Oh, I'm great. That's not church. Church is when you come and you say, I don't even know why I came. I hurt so bad. Let's go and pray together. But what about the service? Who cares? Go to my office, go somewhere and pray, cry together, go in your car and go for coffee, whatever. That's church. But we've learned that when you come here, you've got to say the right things, do the right things, act the right way, put the smile on your face. Everything's fine. No, it's not. And you can see it. Anybody who's discerning, right? How you doing? Oh, I'm great. And you look in their eyes and you're like, yeah, you're far from great. Unfortunately, for me at least anyway, when I'm getting ready to preach in 10 minutes, it's not really the time for me to say, Archie, you are not. I can tell. Let's go talk. Maybe I could say, Archie, you're not. Here's an elder. Go talk. I don't know. But that's why men's, women's groups, home teams, accountability groups are so important for us to say, I'm really not good. I'm so confused in my relationship with God that I don't even know that I want to read the Bible anymore because I don't get it. I thought I knew. Oh, I don't. Where is he? That's a good place to be in the sense that I know God's at work in you. If you're saying, God, where are you? He's there. He's at work. He's doing something in you that you don't know what's going on. He's not telling you. He doesn't need to tell you, but he's at work. And the clouds will clear, the sun will come out, and you'll go, wow, I know God in a greater way than I've ever known him before and didn't expect it. Until then, we like Job. I trust in God. I know he's God. I know he's sovereign. I have all that theology down, but in here, everything is chaos and doesn't make sense. And that's where Job is. That's what he reveals to his friends. And then weeks to come, we'll see what his friends do with that. They might have been better off being silent another 7 days. Last thoughts or comments? Okay. Well, thanks for joining me again. I'm always pleased when at least a couple of people come anyway. It's really depressing when nobody does. Let me pray for you. God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the insights that you give us from Job. And God, help us to know you. Help us to connect with you in a real, sincere, and an emotional way, I guess I could say. God, break into our world. We know you're at work. We know you're doing things. We know you're there. Sometimes we don't understand why you wouldn't just show up like we ask you to, but we trust you. And so we know that behind the scenes you're at work, doing whatever you're doing for us. So thank you for loving us. And God, walk with us and get us through the pain and really hurt and suffering that we go through in this life, maybe even today. I ask this and I pray it in your name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. I think we can leave the tables up because I think we're going to be setting up tables for the dinner on Saturday, so we can probably